hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon.
I didn't cry when I read the message. I just stared at it as if the words might rearrange themselves if I looked long enough. You will not go to Italy with us. My wife prefers it to be a family trip. That was it. A single text message, not even a phone call. My son, my only child, the boy I carried through miscarriages and a complicated third trimester, told me I was not part of his family. Not with a scream, not with a fight, just with a message that blinked on my phone like a notification about a delivery delay. He didn't even sign it with love, just David. I held the phone for a while, my hand trembling slightly. My husband, Albert, was in the living room, folding the same newspaper he'd already read twice that day. He looked up when he saw my face, not with alarm, but with a quiet awareness of someone who has weathered enough storms to recognize a new one coming. "What is it, Marianne?" he asked, his voice calm. I handed him the phone without saying a word. His eyes scanned the screen. Then he sighed, a slow exhale that sounded more tired than angry. "Well," he said, gently placing the phone on the coffee table as if it were something fragile, "that's that." We had talked about this trip for months, ever since David mentioned the wine tour and passing at Christmas. He had said it casually while pouring himself a third glass of Merlot at the dinner table. "We're thinking of going to Italy next fall. Tuscany, Piedmont, maybe even the Amalfi Coast. The real Dolce Vita. You should come. You should come." That's what he had said. Not an invitation, not a plan. Just a suggestion tossed out like a coin into a fountain. I had clung to those words. I imagined the sun-drenched vineyards, the slow walks through old villages, the small cafes where we could sip espresso and laugh like we used to. I imagined us being a family again. I began to dream again, like a girl with a travel brochure under her pillow. I even dusted off our passports, found the little black folder where I kept our old travel documents, receipts from our honeymoon in Quebec, the cruise we took after Albert retired. I slipped in a note, Italy written in my neatest cursive. We could afford it. Of course we could, but we always saved money so that it would remain for David. I thought, no, believed that he would take us with him. A final gesture, a joyful goodbye to the years we spent holding him up. Instead, we got this. That night, we had chicken soup for dinner. I had made it earlier in the day, simmered it for hours like always. I served it in the blue bowls with the little flowers painted on the rims, the ones we got for our 50th wedding anniversary. We ate in silence. Every sip burned going down. I couldn't stop thinking about the word he used. Family, not my wife prefers it to be just the two of us. Not it's our anniversary trip. No, he said family, and we were not included. Later that night, I checked Facebook even though I try not to use it often. My fingers moved as if on their own, searching for something I didn't want to find. And there it was, the photo. His wife, Carla, standing at the airport with a cappuccino in one hand and her phone in the other. Her parents stood behind her, smiling stiffly. And to the left, her sister in a leopard print jacket, throwing a peace sign. Family vacation starts now. The caption read, followed by a string of emojis. Plain wine glass heart. Albert saw it over my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He just placed a hand on mine and left it there. I logged off. That night, I lay awake for hours. The ceiling fan hummed above us, spinning shadows across the ceiling. I stared at them until they blurred. I remembered the night David was born, the way he screamed when they placed him in my arms, how tightly he gripped my finger. I remembered the time he had the flu and refused to take his medicine unless I sang to him. I remembered how when he was 9 he broke a neighbor's window playing baseball and cried on my lap, terrified I would stop loving him. Love, I had told him, is not something that breaks that easily. I had been wrong. Or perhaps I was right, but it only applied one way. Carla never liked us. I saw it from the first time we met her. She was polite but distant. She smiled without warmth, hugged us like someone who had been told she had to. She made little comments, always couched in humor. You guys are so traditional. It's like stepping into a Norman Rockwell painting. She once told me our house smelled like old people's dreams. I laughed at the time, thinking it was a joke. Now I know better. Little by little, David became a visitor, then a stranger. He stopped calling every Sunday. Then it was once a month, then only for birthdays. When he did come over, he never stayed long. Carla always had something planned. It's more of a young crowd thing, Mom, David had said. When did we become too old to matter? I think the most painful part wasn't the exclusion. It was the ease with which it happened. As if cutting us out was no harder than uninviting a neighbor to a dinner party. As if our years of sacrifice, our late nights and early mornings, our savings, our worry, our love meant nothing. They were in Rome now, I guess. Or maybe Florence. I hope the wine tasted sour. I hope the bed was too soft. No, that's not true. I hoped he remembered us. That somewhere between the cobbled streets and the vineyard tastings he paused. That he looked at the sunlight and thought they would have loved this. Albert broke the silence the next morning over coffee. It was never about the money, Marianne. It was about the gesture. I nodded. My coffee had gone cold. The bitterness lingered in my mouth long after. I looked at the small stack of envelopes by the door. One of them was a card we had bought for David's birthday. It had a watercolor painting of a wine bottle and glasses. Inside, I had written to many more celebrations together. We love you more than you know. I tore it in half. Albert watched me, but said nothing. Later, I went out into the garden. The roses were starting to bloom. I picked one red and fragrant and held it close. I remembered David planting this bush when he was 12 with his father's guidance. He was so proud. He watered it every day for a week, then forgot about it. Albert and I kept it alive just like everything else. That evening, we didn't talk about the trip. We didn't mention the message or the photo, but something had shifted. I washed the dishes slower than usual. Albert dried them with care. We moved quietly like people preparing for something sacred. Not a funeral, not quite, but something close, a realization. And beneath it all, a low ember of something unfamiliar. Not rage, not sadness, freedom, and the first whisper of an idea. It started as a quiet ache. Not sharp, not loud, just something heavy in my chest. The morning after that message, I stood by the kitchen sink, rinsing our coffee mugs, and felt it sitting there like a rock. I didn't say anything to Albert right away. He was reading the newspaper again, pretending like nothing was different. But I knew he felt it, too. That same dull pressure that made every breath feel a little tighter. I thought maybe if I got busy, I could push it aside. So I opened the old wooden drawer near the pantry and pulled out a manila folder, the one with the documents from the ranch, my father-in-law's ranch. I sat at the dining table and spread everything out, the old deed, the sale papers, the transfer of funds. I hadn't looked at any of it in years, but now it stared back at me like it wanted to remind me of everything I had tried to forget. Albert walked in a few minutes later and paused. He saw the folder and his face changed. "Why are you looking at that?" I didn't answer right away. I just ran my hand across the papers. I could still smell the hay sometimes when I thought about the ranch. I could still feel the warmth of the sun on my arms while picking peaches in the backyard orchard. "Do you remember what you said to me when we sold it?" I asked. He sat down slowly like his knees suddenly remembered their age. I said it would be for David, for his future. I nodded, and we meant it, every word. We sold the ranch for just over $500,000. We had offers for more, but we chose a local family who promised not to tear it down. We thought we were doing the right thing. We believed that by letting go of our past, we were securing David's future. We didn't take a vacation with that money. We didn't remodel the kitchen or buy new cars. We gave it to David slowly over the years, quietly in pieces, without asking anything in return. When he wanted to go back to graduate school and didn't want student loans, we helped. When he and Carla bought their first condo and needed a bigger down payment, we wired the funds. When Carla said she wanted to start a design business and needed seed money, we gave her a check and told her we believed in her. I remember the day she came to the house and sat at our kitchen table showing us her proposal. She had a printed packet with swatches and logos and a mood board. I made her tea and sat quietly while she explained her dream. I told her I thought it was lovely. I even added, "I'm so glad you feel comfortable coming to us." She smiled and said, "You're always so generous." Now I understand she didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant it as a given. Once we're settled, we'll do something nice for you. When the business grows, we'll take you on a real vacation. You deserve a little luxury for all you've done. I don't remember asking for those things. I just wanted to be part of their lives. I thought our kindness would be the bridge that kept us close, but the bridge only worked one way. "Mom, it's just a temporary thing. We'll pay you back." In the end, we gave our son access to our account. And when they hosted Carla's parents for a long weekend in Napa the following month, she posted photos of their wine tastings and spa treatments. Not once did she mention that the money for that comfort came from us. Not once did they invite us along. We were good enough to patch the leaks in their lives, but never good enough to be seen. I remembered Carla's birthday 2 years ago. We sent her a necklace, gold-plated with her initials engraved. It wasn't extravagant, but it was thoughtful. A week later, I saw her photo with the caption, "Thanks, Mom and Dad. You always know what I love." Her parents, not us. That one stung, but I said nothing. I kept telling myself, she's just closer to her side of the family, or David will make time for us soon. He's just busy. But now I saw the pattern for what it was. We were invisible. Albert leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. I always thought if we gave enough, they'd remember us. They did remember us, I said quietly. When they needed something, I stood up and went to the small wooden chest in the hallway, the one where I kept receipts and old letters. I pulled out a stack of thank you cards, not from David and Carla, from other people we had helped, a neighbor we gave groceries to during a hard winter, a friend from church who borrowed money after a flood. Each one had sent a note. Each one had said thank you. I had kept them all. I held up the blank space where a thank you from our son should have been, and I felt something crack. Not like a sudden snap, more like the slow sound of a wall giving way after years of pressure. I had spent the better part of my life telling myself that it didn't matter. That love was supposed to be quiet, patient, understanding that I didn't need recognition, only connection. But connection requires being seen. And we hadn't been seen in years. We were the silent donors, the emergency contacts, the last-minute solutions. David always said, "You guys are so reliable." It sounded like praise back then. Now it sounds like a label you put on an old appliance. I went outside to the garden. The rose bush David planted when he was 12 was in full bloom. He hadn't seen it in over a year, but I had pruned it. I had watered it. I had kept it alive, just like I had kept the idea of him alive in our lives. I picked one bloom and brought it inside. Albert looked at me. "What do we do now?" I answered without hesitation. "We remember, and then we stop." That evening, we pulled out every document tied to our savings. We reviewed every automatic transfer, every joint account, every line of access. We didn't act in anger. We acted in clarity, because this wasn't just about Italy. It wasn't just about one message or one photo. It was about years of being erased while still being expected to give. It was about the look in Carla's eyes every time we tried to join the conversation, the way she would gently steer David away from us at gatherings, the way she would always sit between us. It was about the silence, the slow, crushing silence of being told without words that you are no longer needed. But the truth is they needed us more than they realized. And now we were done. Not out of spite, not out of cruelty, out of respect for ourselves, for what we gave, and for what we will never give again. The morning we took our lives back didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet, almost peaceful. Albert was already up when I came downstairs. The light in the kitchen was soft, and the coffee had just finished brewing. I could smell it before I stepped into the room. He looked up from the table and said without hesitation, "It's time." I knew exactly what he meant. We didn't speak much as we moved around the house. There was no ceremony, no music, no raised voices, just the clicking of keyboard keys, the rustle of old papers being sorted, and the low hum of the heater. We sat side by side in front of the computer and logged into our joint bank account, the one we had used for decades, the one we had linked to David's life out of trust and love. My fingers hovered over the mouse. There it was, the recurring transfer, automatic, monthly. Quiet. I clicked cancel. The system asked, "Are you sure?" Yes. Another page. "Do you want to disable access for other users?" Yes. It was done. Years of quiet sacrifice undone in 3 clicks. My hand didn't even tremble. We opened the file with our will, the same one we had signed 10 years ago, sitting across from a notary who had complimented us on our neat handwriting. All to David. All to him in the hope that our final gift would be one of care. Now we rewrote it not in anger, not out of vengeance, but with new eyes. We added a line. In the absence of mutual respect and inclusion, gifts of gratitude are no longer appropriate. We selected new beneficiaries, a local scholarship fund, a food pantry, a senior animal rescue, a quiet acknowledgement of people who still understood kindness. I thought I would feel guilt, but I didn't. I felt clean, like someone opening a window after years of stale air. Halfway through updating the documents, I paused. "Do you remember the night David totaled his car?" I asked. Albert looked over. "Of course I do. It was raining. He called at midnight. He was crying," I said. "He thought we'd be angry. We weren't. We were scared, but we didn't yell. We didn't scold. We drove to the scene and held him until the tow truck came. I remembered Carla that night, too. She had refused to come along. She said she had work early the next morning. That was the first moment I wondered if she truly cared about him. Not about his success, not about his charm or his degrees, but him. The boy who used to line up his toy cars along the staircase. The boy who scraped his knees and asked for 3 bedtime stories instead of 2. The boy who called me his best friend when he was 8. That boy was nowhere in Italy. Now I opened Carla's social media page again. Another photo, this time a sunset dinner overlooking vineyards. Her caption read, "Grateful for family." Her mother and father sat on either side of her, glasses raised. Her sister was laughing in the corner of the frame. And David, he looked relaxed, content. He didn't look like someone who had just told his parents they were excluded. I studied his face carefully, hoping to find something. Guilt, remorse, even discomfort. But there was nothing. It reminded me of something painful. The day my father told me to leave home, I was 19. I had refused to drop out of school to work in his store. I wanted more. He didn't understand that. And I'll never forget the way he said it. "You think you're better than us? Fine, go be better, but don't come back." I cried for 2 days, but I never did go back. And now, decades later, my son had done the same. Not with those words, but with that message. My wife prefers it to be a family trip. It felt just as final. Albert reached across the table and took my hand. "Let's do something for us now." So I opened a new tab. I typed in Italy's small group tours. We found one that made my heart ache a little. A 10-day journey through Florence, Siena, and the Tuscan hills. Meals included, wine tastings, even a cooking class. What if we went? I whispered. "We will," Albert said. "We deserve our own version of La Dolce Vita." I nodded, though my heart was pounding. Because even as we planned, something inside me twisted. Not because I doubted the choice, but because I still loved him. Even after everything. Even after being pushed aside. That was the unexpected twist. The sharp turn I hadn't seen coming. Love doesn't disappear because you finally stand up for yourself. It doesn't vanish because you cut the strings. It just changes. Now it felt like a memory I had to carry, a beautiful thing I could no longer touch. When I closed our bank statements and saved the updated will, I felt like I had packed away something more than papers. I had packed away the version of us that would have waited by the phone, the version of us that would have apologized for being hurt, the version of us that kept baking birthday cakes that no one came to eat. Later that evening, snow began to fall, slow soft flakes that clung to the window pane. I stood in the kitchen watching the street grow quiet, and I realized something. They had always assumed we would be here, like furniture, like wallpaper, reliable, silent, permanent. But love isn't permanent when it's taken for granted, and our kindness was never meant to be a blink check. So now we would spend what remained of our energy on each other, on long walks, on recipes we hadn't tried, on stories we hadn't told. We wouldn't announce it. We wouldn't post about it. We would simply live it, and in that we would write our own ending. A quiet one, but not a sad one. The first message came just before 6 a.m. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I opened one eye and saw David's name light up the screen. I didn't touch it. I just turned over and let the silence continue. 5 minutes later, another buzz, then another. Then Albert's phone started, too. Message after message. I knew what they were before I even looked. We had stopped his access, and he had finally noticed. When I did open the phone, it wasn't a greeting or an apology. It wasn't even a question. It was a complaint. Hey, something's wrong with the account. Cards aren't working. Did the bank make a mistake? We can't check into the hotel. Let me know. That was it. Not a single mention of what he had said to us. Not a word about excluding us from their so-called family trip. No acknowledgement of the betrayal. Just inconvenience, as if we were his customer service hotline. I read the message once, twice, and then I placed the phone face down on the kitchen table. Albert walked in just as I was pouring the coffee. He noticed, I said. Albert nodded, but didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. That day we didn't answer. Not the messages, not the missed calls, not the emails. By noon the tone had shifted. Mom, Dad, this is serious. They're asking for another form of payment. Everything was supposed to be covered. Can you fix this? Fix this. As if we broke something. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. This reminded me of when he was 16 and wrecked his bike by riding into a street sign. He came home angry, blaming the city for putting the sign too low. He refused to admit he wasn't watching where he was going. That same tone lived in this message. The refusal to look inward. The expectation that we would smooth it over. By evening, his wife had message too. Hi, Marianne. Just a heads up that our cards seem frozen. We're having some trouble checking out from the wine package. Can you take a look when you get a minute? Appreciate it. No emotion, no warmth. Just that same clipped politeness she always used when she wanted something. And that word again, appreciate. They had appreciated us, right into invisibility. Albert and I ate dinner in silence that night. Chicken and rice, simple, comforting. But I couldn't stop hearing their voices in my head. Not from the messages, but from the past. All the small ways they made us feel like furniture in our own family. The time they invited Carla's parents to Christmas and told us last minute that there wasn't enough space for everyone to stay overnight. The time David told us not to bring up politics in front of her family, even though we never had. The time we offered to host Thanksgiving and Carla responded, "Oh, it's just easier at my mom's. She has more modern cookware." Every moment now felt like it had been building toward this. By the next morning, the tone of the messages had changed again. Now it was panic. This is urgent. We have a balance due on the villa. They want payment today, or we lose the booking. Please respond. Mom, Dad, are you okay? I'm starting to get worried. Why aren't you replying? Please say something. There it was. The shift from annoyance to concern. I still didn't answer. Instead, I picked up a pen and wrote a single sentence on a small sheet of paper. You chose a family. We're crossing you out of ours. I didn't send it yet. I just folded it and kept it in the drawer by the phone. I wanted to say it when the time was right. Later that day, Carla posted no photos. That said more than any message. David messaged Albert directly that night. What's going on? We had a plan. Everything was supposed to go through the account, like always. You can't just cut me off without warning. That's not fair. Fair. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. I whispered aloud to no one. You think this is unfair? I could have yelled. I could have listed every dollar, every favor, every time we bit our tongues to keep the peace. But I chose silence for my son because I still hoped he'd sit without silence long, enough to hear the truth inside it. But by day 3, the silence didn't change him. It just made him angrier. This is childish. We're stranded in a foreign country with no way to pay for anything. I hope you realize how serious this is. Albert read that message and calmly walked to the coffee pot. As he poured a fresh cup, he said he never once asked if we were okay. Not once, he was right. In all the messages, not once had David asked if something had happened on our end. Not once had he considered that. Maybe something had gone wrong for us because we weren't people anymore. We were a service. On the 4th day, the calls started. Blocked numbers, international members. Then, finally, the voicemail box filled. Then came the email. I don't understand what changed. You are always supportive. You were always there for me. Now you just stop. What did I do that was so wrong? I almost answered. Almost. But then I remembered. He knew. He knew we were hurt. He knew that message. My wife prefers it to be a family trip. Cut deep. He just didn't care until the money stopped. Carla finally sent a single message. We can talk when you're ready to be reasonable. Reasonable. I sent David one message. You chose family. We're cutting you out of ours. I imagined his face when he read it. I imagined David trying to twist the story, trying to explain that we were overreacting, but deep down he knew. And so did I. The next morning, I stood in the garden and watched the frost melt slowly from the leaves. I thought about the time David was 5, and he asked if he could live with us forever. He said he never wanted to grow up and leave. I had laughed and said, one day you'll want your own space, but this will always be your home. I had meant it, but some people choose to move out of more than just a house. They move out of love. That evening, Albert and I sat on the porch with hot tea. The sun was setting low, casting gold across the lawn. He looked over and asked, Do you think he'll come back from this? I thought for a long time, maybe, but he won't come back the same. And neither will we, because something had changed. Not just the money, not just the trust, something deeper. We had been erased quietly for years. The trip just made it loud. But now we had drawn a line. And for the first time they would have to live without us, without our money, without our silence, without our constant quiet love. And we would finally live with ourselves, with peace, with clarity, with the knowledge that we mattered, even if only to each other. It had been 2 weeks since the last message. No new calls, no emails, no photos, no apologies. The silence from David was now complete. And yet, for the first time in years, our house felt lighter. I hadn't realized how heavy it had become, not with noise, but with hope. Hoped that maybe one day they would see us, that maybe if we just gave more, stayed quieter, smiled bigger, they would remember who we were to them. Now that weight was gone and something strange was taking its place. Peace. It came in small ways. The hum of the heater in the early morning, the clink of Albert's spoon against his cereal bowl, the sound of birds gathering near the feeder outside our kitchen window. Life didn't stop. It just changed shape. One afternoon, I went to check the mailbox. There was an envelope without a return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a neighbor's note or a church flyer. Instead, it was a letter, 3 short paragraphs. Dear Marianne, you don't know me, but I know of you. Years ago, I worked part-time with Carla at her design studio. You came in once and brought lunch for everyone. You remembered my name even though I was just the assistant. I never forgot that. When I heard how your family treated you, I felt I needed to write. Please know you were seen. Even when they didn't say it, you were noticed. Thank you. I read it twice. Then I folded it and sat down at the kitchen table. Albert walked in a few minutes later and saw me holding the letter. Good news, he asked. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. It wasn't about praise. It wasn't about recognition. It was about truth. Somewhere someone had seen me. Not as an obligation. Not as a checkbook, as a person. That night, the first message in 2 weeks came from David. We're back. I think we should talk. Carla says, you overreacted, but I want to hear your side. Maybe we can clear this up. There it was. Overreacted. As if years of being used and excluded had boiled down to a reaction. As if we were emotional children who had misunderstood a perfectly reasonable adult conversation. And then came Carla, a long message, perfect grammar, empty warmth. I'm sorry if things were miscommunicated. I never meant for you to feel left out. You've always been helpful. We were just trying to keep things balanced. David didn't mean to upset you. Can we all move forward? Helpful. Balanced, those words again. Polite, cold, disconnected. I didn't respond. 3 days later, the guilt turned into pressure. First, a family group message. A smiling photo from Carla's sister's birthday. A caption, we missed you. Then, a text from David. You know, you don't have to punish us forever. Families fight. Let's just get back to normal. Normal. I stared at that word until it blurred. Then I turned the phone off and left it in the drawer. Albert and I spent more time outside after that. We took longer walks. We cooked slow meals. We laughed. More, and slowly the noise inside my head, the questions, the doubts, the what-ifs grew quiet. I realized something powerful. Just because someone is your child doesn't mean they know how to love you. Love isn't automatic. It's built. It's chosen. And if someone chooses not to love you, no amount of sacrifice will make them start. The week before we were supposed to leave for Italy, our own trip, booked and paid for ourselves, Carla posted again. A picture of a quiet dinner at home. Grateful for peace and family time, it read. David wasn't in the photo. I didn't care enough to wonder where he was. Then one evening, Albert came and holding his phone. You should see this, he said. He handed me the phone. A message from David. Short. I didn't realize how much I depended on you until you were gone. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm sorry. My eyes burned. I didn't cry. I just read it over and over. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Albert asked, are you going to respond? I thought about it. I thought about every word, every ignored birthday, every last-minute cancellation, every polite dismissal, every time he chose her comfort over our inclusion. And I said, not yet, because sorry is just a start. It doesn't erase the years. And I wasn't going back to the place where I had to earn the right to be loved. A week later, we left for our trip. We packed light, just 2 carry-ons. I brought a scarf I hadn't worn in years. The one David bought me when he was in college before he met Carla. It reminded me of the version of him I used to know. The plane ride was smooth. The air was clear. And when we landed in Florence, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. We walked through sunlit streets. We drank coffee in small shops. We sat in silence and watched the world go by. On our 3rd day, we took a wine tour through a family-owned vineyard. The guide, a kind woman in her 60s, showed us the cellar. She told us how their wine was made with care, not speed. We don't rush anything. Worth loving, she said. That line stayed with me. I wrote it down in a small notebook I carried. That night, over dinner, Albert raised his glass. To new seasons, and to the years we finally kept for ourselves. I clinked my glass against his and smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. We didn't send any photos. We didn't post about the trip. We lived it just for us. When we returned home, the house welcomed us like an old friend. The silence now felt comforting, not empty, not lonely, just ours. The mailbox was full. Bills, flyers, and one postcard from a city we had visited. It had no name on it, just 4 words. I hope you smiled. I placed it on the fridge with a magnet. That evening, I sat in the kitchen, wrapped in my old scarf, with Albert reading the newspaper across from me. The wine glasses were half full. The light above us was soft and golden. I looked around the room and saw not what was missing, but what had remained us. After everything we had chosen each other, and in that choice we found home again. I realized something sitting there in the quiet glow. Age is not about weakness. It's about dignity. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. And I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icons. Thanks for watching.